I was in recovery, learning to walk again after the fall. My husband had power of attorney. My family had access. They sold my car, cleared my account, rented out my home, said, "She won't remember this anyway." I did, every detail. And when I took them to court, I didn't ask for the money back. I took their names off everything I ever owned. Permanently. I was learning to walk again. The first time they got me out of the bed, I thought my knees would snap. I gripped the bars on either side like they could save me. They couldn't. The room smelled like antiseptic and plastic. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, while someone younger than me charted my vitals and told me I was doing great. I wasn't. The fall had shattered my body bones, sure, but more than that. Timing, autonomy. Memory in pieces that flickered in and out like bad radio. Some days I couldn't remember how to chew. Other days I couldn't remember what month it was. But I always remembered I was alone. People visited at first, friends. A few extended family members. He came sometimes. Sat in the corner and scrolled. Brought coffee he didn't ask if I could drink. Recovery was slow. Cruel. Everything you take for granted becomes something you have to relearn. Walking was a process. Standing was a goal. Eating was a challenge. Speaking was work. I didn't complain, not out loud. Because the body couldn't move, but the mind was still mine, foggy, yes, but watching. Quietly, always watching. And somewhere inside that fog, something sharp was waiting. He had power of attorney. It was temporary, that's what we agreed on, just until the surgery, just in case. A precaution. I signed the papers without thinking twice. We were together. He knew what mattered to me. He said all the right things, that he'd protect what I couldn't, that he'd handle only what was necessary, that he'd be careful. I believed him. He held the folder when we left the lawyer's office. Said it felt heavy. Smiled, tucked it under his arm like it didn't mean anything. After the fall, it kicked in automatically. No follow-up, no second conversation. I couldn't speak clearly, couldn't walk, couldn't manage my own food, let alone my finances. So he stepped in. He had access to everything. Bank accounts, insurance policies, medical files. He handled the paperwork, the bills, the calls, and I told myself this was the kind of man I chose. Someone who could lead when I couldn't. What I didn't know, what no one told me, was how fast a signature could become a weapon. My family had access. Not by mistake, not by accident, he gave it to them. He wasn't overwhelmed. He wasn't too busy. He made a choice to spread control like it was charity, to hand off pieces of my life as if they were favors. They had my passwords, my keys, my pins. They had the alarm code to my home, the spare set of checks in my desk drawer, the list of my monthly bills. He shared everything. I found out later that he'd told them I insisted, that I wanted them involved. That it was what she would have wanted. I didn't. They accessed my accounts like they were cleaning out a closet. Called it managing. Called it support. When my sister came to visit, she brought her laptop and logged into my email like it was hers. My uncle sorted mail from a pile he'd been collecting at my address. My cousin called my insurance company to check something. I wasn't in the room for any of it. But my name was, and it was being used without pause. They didn't treat me like someone who would return. They treated me like paperwork. They sold my car, not junked, not stolen. Sold, listed, shown, negotiated, and signed away without hesitation. I found out from a nurse. Casual mention in the hallway. "Your sister said you wouldn't be driving anymore." I asked what she meant. She looked confused. "She said you approved it." When I pressed, they gave me a copy of the transaction, bill of sale, notarized, dated. My signature at the bottom. Except it wasn't mine. I traced the shape of the letters. I knew my own handwriting. I knew when someone had copied it and called it care. The car was paid off. Maintained. Mine, gone now, no apology, no warning, no discussion. When I asked, he shrugged. "You weren't using it. We needed the money for your medical stuff." But I had insurance. I had coverage. And I hadn't asked them for a dime. It wasn't about need. It was about access. And the moment they got it, they stopped asking for permission. They cleared my account, every dollar, every cent. The first time I saw the statement, I thought it was a glitch, a zero balance on an account I'd built slowly, deliberately. My savings, my emergency fund, my buffer, gone. I asked the nurse to print another copy. Then I asked someone from billing to confirm. Then I called the bank myself, slow, careful, trying to make my voice steady enough not to be dismissed. The woman on the line was polite, efficient. Yes, she confirmed. All withdrawals were authorized, power of attorney is still active. I asked for the transactions. She read them aloud: hotel charges, electronics, wire transfers. A deposit into an account that wasn't mine. I didn't speak. She asked if I'd like to file a dispute. I said yes, then no. Then I asked her to mail me the full record. When the envelope arrived 3 days later, I opened it with one hand. Read every line. Circled every name. Marked every date. They'd taken everything like it was owed to them. Not because I was gone, but because I was still here and they thought I wouldn't remember. They rented out my home, not short-term, not casually. They listed it, staged it, signed a lease. Strangers were living in my space, eating at my table, sleeping in my bed, folding laundry in the room where I kept the only pieces of myself that hadn't been taken. I found out during a therapy session. My physical therapist mentioned a neighborhood nearby, said she drove past a house for rent, and nearly called the number before realizing it had already been taken. Same street, same number, my name still on the mailbox. I asked her to repeat it. She did. When I called, a man answered. The new tenant. Friendly, apologetic. Oh, I didn't know the owner was still alive. That's what he said. I hung up before I heard more. Later, when I confronted them, my cousin answered like it was nothing. You weren't coming back anytime soon. It didn't make sense for it to sit empty. We figured you'd be grateful. We kept it in the family. It wasn't theirs. But they'd already decided I didn't count. And they were using my absence like a blank check. They said, she won't remember. I wasn't supposed to hear it. I was in the hallway outside my hospital room, gripping the rail with one hand, trying to make it to the end and back without collapsing. They were in the room, the door was cracked. She won't remember this anyway, my mother said. She barely knows what day it is, my sister replied. It's not like she's going to come after us. Then a third voice him, calm, confident. By the time she's clear, it'll be handled. It's already handled. They weren't whispering. They spoke like I was gone. Like my mind was a filing cabinet they could empty and lock behind them. Like my memory was the last barrier between them and everything I owned. I stood there, silent, until my legs started shaking. Then I turned and made my way back to the bed. Inch by inch, I didn't tell anyone what I heard, not yet. Because I knew something they didn't. I remembered that conversation. And soon I'd remember everything else. I remembered everything, not all at once. Not in a movie scene. Just flashes at first, a phrase here, a smell there, the look on his face when he thought I wasn't listening. It came in pieces. The nurse with the clipboard who kept asking if I'd given consent for certain charges. The cousin who brought me a phone charger and made a comment about my nice tenants. The friend who looked nervous every time she visited and never stayed long. Then the receipts started making sense. The names, the transfers, the way people talked around me instead of to me. I remembered the sound of his voice when he signed the form. I remembered my sister whispering at the foot of my bed when she thought I was asleep. I remembered my father asking if I had a will. And I remembered exactly what it felt like to be treated like a placeholder for a person no one expected to come back. They didn't count on me regaining control, but I did, and every memory sharpened the edge of what I was going to do next. I smiled when they visited. Let them sit beside me. Let them bring flowers. Let them lie. They talked like everything was fine, asked if I needed anything, told stories about what had been so hard while I was out of it, left out every part that mattered. I nodded. I listened. I let them think they were in the clear. He held my hand like he hadn't erased me. My sister brought cookies like she hadn't sold my car. My mother fluffed my pillow like she hadn't stood over me and said I wouldn't remember. I asked them small questions. Let them talk, took mental notes. Who slipped? Who dodged? Who changed the subject? Who couldn't look me in the eye? They smiled too easily. I watched everything. Because pretending to forget gave me more power than confronting them ever could. They thought I was recovering. I was, just not the way they assumed. I said nothing. I documented everything. I kept my voice even, my face calm, my questions casual. Behind the scenes, I collected it all: phone logs, bank statements. emails forwarded from old accounts I regained access to, photos of the car on the resale site, lease agreements with forged signatures, notes from every visit, every conversation, every slip. I recorded calls, saved voicemails, took screenshots. They laughed over dinner once, not knowing my phone was recording in my lap. They texted each other about covering tracks, and I had copies. No yelling, no accusations, just data. Because I didn't need their confessions. I needed their patterns. They thought they were safe because I hadn't raised my voice. But I didn't have to shout. I was building something stronger than an apology. I got a lawyer, not for revenge. Not to ruin them, just to make the story official on paper under oath in court. I sat across from her in a small office with cold air and clean lines. I brought everything. A folder thick with evidence, timelines, names, signatures that weren't mine. She didn't interrupt while I explained, just listened. Took notes. Asked the right questions at the right time. When I finished, she said one sentence. "You have more than enough." There was no drama, no gasping, just quiet confirmation that I hadn't imagined it, that the damage wasn't invisible just because it was called support. We filed quickly. She drafted the petition with precision. Named each one, outlined every overreach, every transaction, every breach of trust wrapped in family logic. The law didn't care about feelings, and for once neither did I didn't warn them. No text, no call. No long, dramatic confrontation, just court dates. The notice arrived by mail, certified, unmistakable. They didn't see it coming. I was still answering their calls, still letting them visit, still letting them believe the lie they'd written for me, the one where I stayed soft, stayed quiet, stayed grateful for the damage. When the papers landed, the panic started. My sister left 3 voicemails. My cousin texted twice, trying to act confused. My mother called and hung up, then called again. He didn't call. He sent a message. "Can we talk about this first?" There was nothing to talk about. The time for explanations had passed the moment they cashed in on my silence. Now all that was left was accountability. They called it a misunderstanding. Suddenly, I mattered again. Suddenly, I was worth explaining things to. They reached out like nothing had happened or like everything had, but none of it was their fault. "We thought we were helping. You weren't in any shape to make decisions. We didn't think you'd come back so strong." That last one slipped out from my cousin. She laughed after she said it like it was a compliment. My mother cried, said I was breaking the family. My sister blamed him, said she just followed his lead. He said I gave him power, as if signing a document justified everything they did with it. No one admitted they crossed a line. They just asked me to lower the fence they'd built with my name. It was never a misunderstanding. It was theft dressed up as care, and I wasn't confused. I sat silent in the courtroom, no outbursts. No speeches, no emotion, just presence. They walked in looking rattled, no coordinated story, no unity, just scattered excuses wrapped in desperation. My lawyer spoke for me. She had the facts, the records, the signed documents, the forged ones, the transfers, the witnesses, the voice recordings. I didn't need to say anything. Every time their attorney tried to soften the language, it was family. There was no malicious intent. They believed they were acting in her best interest. The evidence answered louder. They stole, lied, signed, spent, rented, and I remembered. That was the story. I didn't flinch when they looked at me. They hadn't earned eye contact, and I wasn't giving it away. The judge didn't even look at them twice. She read the statements, reviewed the signatures, skimmed the dates, then ruled, full revocation of power of attorney, full reinstatement of my accounts, property, and legal control. Immediate removal of all names tied to my estate. No room for argument. No drawn-out deliberation. Just facts. She didn't ask why they did it. She didn't need a motive. The betrayal was in the paper trail, and it was enough. My sister gasped when the ruling came down. My mother blinked fast, waiting for someone else to fix it. He looked at the floor like it might open and save him. No one spoke my name. Not then. Not while walking out. They didn't have to. It wasn't theirs to use anymore. I didn't ask for the money back. Not a dollar, not the car, not the rent, not the gifts they gave themselves with my name on the receipt. I didn't want repayment. I wanted distance. What they took was never going to be restored, not in checks, not in court orders, not in anything they could return, so I let it go, not out of grace, out of clarity. Because the cost of keeping any thread tied to them was higher than the losses they thought they got away with. I wasn't trying to win. I was trying to get free. I changed everything. My name. Again. The version that came after survival wasn't built for convenience. It was mine. I changed the locks not just on my front door, but on every system they once had access to. Bank accounts, health records, emergency contacts. Gone, I changed my number, my email, my PO box. I updated my beneficiaries, my will, my power of attorney. This time, no one was listed but me. I didn't announce it. I didn't post a thing. I didn't tell a soul except the lawyer who filed it all. They would find out the way I found out about my empty accounts in silence, with no warning. It wasn't about becoming unreachable. It was about becoming untouchable. I took their names off everything. Titles, deeds, medical authorizations, points of contact, inheritance lines, all of it, erased. Not crossed out, deleted. Legally, permanently, without apology. I made new copies of every document. Reread every contract they'd once signed with my signature beneath theirs. Then I replaced them with blanks. Left those spaces empty until I chose otherwise. They were no longer next of kin. No longer listed under in case of emergency. No longer tethered to any version of me that could be claimed. This wasn't erasure out of anger. It was protection by precision. Their access was a privilege, one they spent without caution. And now they don't exist anywhere in my records but the court transcripts. I left them with nothing, not out of cruelty, out of necessity. They took what they could when they thought I wouldn't notice. They built comfort on my absence, assuming I'd never return to challenge it. When I didn't come back to reclaim their approval. I came back to remove the last traces of them from the spaces they had no right to enter. No more holidays, no updates. No whispered chances at reconnection, just silence. I didn't speak ill of them. Didn't warn others. I didn't need to. I left with what mattered, my name, my freedom, my clarity. And they stayed behind with the story they told themselves to sleep at night. Permanently. That's how I chose to end it, not with a door left cracked, not with a number saved, just in case, but with a lock turned behind me that only I had the key to. The house was mine again, room by room, paper by paper. Not just legally, but emotionally. I walked through it slowly, touched the walls they'd once stepped past like they owned them. Opened drawers that used to hold their fingerprints. None remained, the furniture was different, the layout had changed. But what made it mine wasn't the Dacre, it was the absence of them. I stood at the door one last time, checked the locks, turned off the light, and pulled it closed. Not to keep them out, but to keep myself in whole, untouched final. Thank you for watching. Please do not forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I love you all.